Hello everyone, it's Judy. In today's video, we're gonna shade Zendaya's face, neck, ears, and earrings. We're gonna focus on shading using graphite powder, but first let's talk about the art supplies I'll be using. In this video, we're not gonna be using a lot of art supplies, but if you're interested in learning more about them, you can check the last video I posted where I talked about each one of them and explained it more. As I said before, we're going to be focusing on graphite powder, so I'm going to show you how you can make it yourself. All you're going to need is a normal HB pencil, the brand isn't important, whatever works for you, and a cutter. There's a million ways of making graphite powder, but this is what I do usually because I find it satisfying, I find it therapeutic in a way. I don't know about you, but this is what I do. You can just sharpen your pencil and that will leave some powder. I smooth it out with sandpaper that leaves powder, and I like to shave it with this cutter, as you can see, and then I store it in a jar. And you don't have to only use one pencil. I usually make a mixture of HB, H, and B pencils. Now the way you apply the powder is very important because you want to keep your drawing as clean as possible and you want to avoid smudges. So take the powder with your brush and tap it until you get rid of all the excess powder. Now on your paper, you're gonna make sure that you are so gentle with it. You're gonna have to move your hand in a circular motion, so lightly on the paper, don't press too hard, and you're gonna have to build up layers. So your first layer should be so light you're gonna hardly even see it. And when you dip your brush to take extra powder, don't forget to tap it again to leave the excess. As you can see, I like to keep the powder on an extra paper, but of course we're not gonna need all this powder. When I'm done, I just put the powder back in the jar. Okay, so I'm gonna start with adding my first layer. It's gonna be an even layer. It's gonna be very light on the whole face. I'm not gonna even look at the reference. I'm just gonna apply the powder on the whole face because I want to break the whiteness of the paper. In case you don't know me, I actually did draw her face features on YouTube step by step. In the previous video I posted, you can check it out and draw her with us. And I'll leave the link of the reference picture in the description box so you can have it in high quality. And now that I have finished my even layer, I'm gonna add another layer, but this time I'm gonna be looking at the reference picture and noticing where are the shadows. I'm gonna notice where the areas that have heavier shadows than others and just follow that. So I'm using a big brush to define her cheekbones more, and I also noticed that her dimples are visible a bit, so I'm doing that also with my brush. And you're gonna feel that it's not 100% accurate, and that's correct because it's a big brush, and we're gonna go over that again with a smaller brush to make it more detailed. But as I said before, I'm gonna have to build up layers, so it doesn't make sense to have details on the second layer. You probably guessed it by now, but this is gonna take a lot of time and patience, but the results are worth it. And now that I've reached the shade I want, after many layers, I'm gonna start adding the details with my small brush. If you add too much powder in one place, you're just gonna need your kneaded eraser, tap it, and it will be gone. Don't erase it with a normal eraser. Even if you don't have a kneaded eraser, take your normal eraser and tap it. Be so gentle with it because you don't want to erase the layers you've been building. Now, why do I think that shading with powder is more professional? And this is just my personal opinion. Because I've tried shading with a normal pencil and I've tried shading with powder, and I like this one better, even though it's harder, it's messier, and it's more time consuming. So in my experience, I found that shading with powder gives more realistic and smoother results. Especially when I draw young people that have clear skin. Whenever I tried to shade that with a normal pencil, I didn't get the smooth skin I wanted. But when I tried shading with powder, I was genuinely surprised by how realistic that was. And the first drawing I tried using powder was Harry Styles. And it's one of my favorite drawings now because it's insanely realistic, and you can see it on my Instagram and judge for yourself. Even though I didn't use charcoal back then, I only used pencil, but it is one of my favorite drawings of all times. Okay, let's go back to Zendaya. As you saw, I added details using a mechanical pencil and then highlights with a mono zero eraser, just some skin pores when I felt needed, according to the reference picture and blend it with a brush. And now I'm defining her face more with a charcoal or a black pencil, whatever you have. You can also use the darkest pencil you have, doesn't matter, just control your hand pressure. Of course, this is not the case for every portrait, but in ours, there are heavy shadows on her neck below her face, so that's what we're doing. And I'm taking the shadows down. I'm blending the line and I'm taking the shadows down because I don't want to affect her face with these heavy shadows. I'm gonna keep it light shaded and I'm gonna take the shadows down. And as you can see, I went off her neck, but this is her hair, so I'm gonna shade that later. It's also gonna be dark, so it's okay, but this is not the case for every portrait. It depends on your reference. And there are very delicate highlights on her chin. I'm doing these with the Mono Zero eraser because it's tiny, but you can also shape your kneaded eraser and use that. It's gonna give the same effect. And you can also use the tiny eraser on the tip of your pencil. And now for the neck, we're gonna repeat the same process. I'm just defining the lines with my mechanical pencil just to know where the shadows are, just a sketch. And now I'm applying the first layer of powder. But here I didn't start with an even layer on the whole thing because her neck is lighter than the face and I didn't feel that I needed to do that. You may have noticed, but I sometimes have some extra powder on the paper and I brush it off, and this is very important. Do not use your hand to clean it or else you'll leave smudges. Now because this is relatively a large area, you can actually use a tissue to blend, but you don't add extra powder with the tissue, you just blend what you already have. Now I'm just redefining where the darkest areas are with my mechanical pencil and shading that again. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of artists do is that they define the outer lines of anything more than the shadows, and that is true, but you are doing it wrong. You don't make it look like a separate line, you have to blend it in with your shadows. And how you're gonna do that? With a pencil, move it in a circular motion, try to blend this outer line with your shadows and blend with a Q-tip or a blending stump. Just make it look one, blended. Don't make the outer line a separate line because that's not correct. If you look at your hand, you won't see the outer line darker than the color of your hand. So you don't do that with the face, you don't do that with the neck, you don't do that with anything you draw. As I said before, there are heavy shadows below her face, so I'm just building up these shadows accordingly. And I didn't feel like I needed to show what I did for her outfit because I just colored it in. I didn't do anything special, I just used my black pencil, colored it in, and just blended it. Fully black. And one other thing, I said that in the previous video, but when you draw the neck, you don't have to follow exactly what you're seeing in the reference picture because it's not the main focus of the portrait. Nobody will look at the neck and be like, yes, I recognize this neck. No, don't worry about it, you don't have to be 100% accurate. And that also applies on her ears. You don't also have to be 100% accurate because they're also not the main focus. But in this case, her ears are mostly covered with hair, so it might be easier for you to draw the hair first, but I needed to leave the hair to a separate video. But it's up to you, you can draw it now, you can draw it later, but you're gonna see me draw some hairs above it or some heavy shadows, and that is just because of the hair. Normally ears are not that dark, but it depends on the reference. And now for the earrings. FYI, drawing jewelry is not easy. I personally find it very challenging because there are heavy shadows and heavy highlights at the same time, and sometimes you're gonna find some reflections. So it's not easy to show it all in such a small object at the same time. So it's up to you. You can skip it, you can just complete finishing her ear, or you can try to draw it. I did, but since they're so small, I didn't really pay much attention to them. I tried my best, but I didn't care much for them. So it's up to you. So I started by shading them all in, but defining the outer lines more because I knew I needed to add highlights in the middle, and I'm gonna do that with my Mono Zero eraser as I'm seeing in the reference. Now I'm shading the middle that is holding the barrels with my black pencil because, as I said before, there are heavy shadows and I needed to show that with my charcoal pencil. And I'm lightly going over her cheeks with my mechanical pencil just because I felt that her cheeks needed more shading. Now when it comes to drawing jewelry, a white general pen is really a game changer because it will give you that strong highlight that you want, that strong reflection. But in case you don't have it, you don't have to worry about it because it's just an earring. You don't have to get it 100% right. And I have spent years without having a white general pen because I couldn't find it anywhere until I ordered it from Amazon. It's not really available everywhere and you might not find it where you live, but if you do, it will be a game changer for you. But if you don't feel bad. And now I'm just turning down the strong whiteness of the general pen with my mechanical pencil. Now that's her hair. I just felt compelled to draw it because it felt silly not to, but this is just her hair. Now the same explanation applies on the second ear except that it is shaded more than the other one because it has more hair on it. So just look at the reference and try to copy what you see, but the general concept is the same. And I also added some shadows on her face because I felt that I needed to, but that is not necessarily the case for you. Just look at your drawing and do what feels right. And if you're gonna use the general pen, I advise you to leave it till the last step even after you draw the hair because you might smudge it and it will turn gray, so you can just skip that until you finish the drawing and add it as final touches. Finally, I'm going over the whole face with my kneaded eraser, just dabbing it where I feel that I need to, just as final touches. I just love adding these final touches. And yeah, that's it. I hope you give powder shading a try, and if you do, please let me know if you prefer it over normal shading. Next Saturday, I'm gonna post the final tutorial, which is the hair tutorial, so stay tuned, draw her with me, watch the last video if you haven't already, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.